All right, we'll get started. Thanks everybody for joining today. My name's Randall Stevens. I'm the founder and CEO of AVAIL, and I've got my colleague at AVAIL, Clay Watson, here. He's going to be helping monitor. If you got questions in chat, you can put them in the chat window, and we should have plenty of time here in the hour to answer questions. I really want to thank Aaron Vorwerk from Egnyte for joining today. If you got on here early, you heard us chit-chatting about him. Actually, my wife and I are going down to visit Aaron and his wife in Texas next month for the rodeo. So we're chit-chatting about that before the webinar. But Aaron, I'll just kick this off by saying, this is, it's not a culmination because I feel like we're just getting started with this, but we've been working pretty closely with Egnyte probably the last 3 years. If you're not familiar with Egnyte, some of you that may be on the call are AVAIL customers and aren't using Egnyte or thinking about using it. Aaron's going to give a little overview of that. But we've been working pretty closely with the Egnyte team the last 3 years. They've just been killing it in the market. Got great solution. A lot of AEC customers. A lot of that credit to Aaron and the team over that they built on the AEC side of the business, specifically for integrating of Egnyte into these AEC environments. So as we've seen the popularity of Egnyte and a lot of our customers, our current customers, either already on or moving to Egnyte, this is really our work on AVAIL to do a direct integration is one of the first direct integrations with a platform like this. So that's why I say this isn't a culmination. We're getting the first version of this integration out, but I think there's going to be a lot of exciting things that we're going to be able to talk about. We'll kick some ideas around with you here at the end of this call. I'm going to give a quick, I'll give an overview. Aaron and I'll both give kind of respective, just a couple minute overviews about what our platforms are for those of you that aren't familiar, but most everybody that's on this call are already our respective customers and are on here to learn kind of what this new integration looks like. So we have a feature of AVAIL called Stream, and now we've got Stream for Egnyte. So I'm going to run through that. I'm actually going to give you a live demo. We've actually started installing this in some customer environments, so it's actually live out there. And we're finishing up some kind of last development. And then, as I said, we'll take some time here at the end to both answer your questions about this, and then Aaron and I'll kick around some, what we think some future opportunities. Did I spell that right? Opportunities. Yeah. All right. Let me hand it over to you, Aaron.
Sure. Thanks, Randall. For those who don't know Egnyte, or for those who do, I guess thanks for your business. And for those who don't, we're really built around three main pillars. The first being collaboration. So Egnyte emulates a file server in the cloud. We've been doing that since 2007. We were never a consumer tool, so we started about the same time as Box and Dropbox, a couple years before Google Drive, but we were never oriented towards that consumer market. And 2007, it was pretty novel to be moving, enterprise companies to the cloud, but that's where we started. And so the collaboration pillar, if you think about it, is what would replace your typical file storage, the boxes, Dropboxes, et cetera, but also SharePoint, also on-prem servers, also multi-office collaboration solutions like Panzera, Nasuni, LucidLink, that sort of thing. So we do all of that. We have a very deep intelligence pillar. We've actually been using AI in products since 2013. I'll explain what we use that for in a minute, but like this went from the back of house enterprise governance kind of capabilities, which is what's next, and all of the data classification and backend things that are needed to sort of secure your data up through like the conversational AI that everyone's been playing with for the last 4 or 5 years. And we have those kind of same capabilities offered in a secure tenant for all of our customers today. And then the third pillar is really around the data governance piece. So we have class-leading capabilities around data classification and metadata tagging, and then actions to be taken on that data, as well as cybersecurity and ransomware prevention and protection and discovery proactively, behavioral detection, et cetera. You can have hundreds of compliance protocols, all of that stuff. So we would compete against Purview and other, let's say, Varonis, things like that in that space. And this is all built on a very robust platform. So we offer 4 nines of uptime. Our backend is 11 nines of uptime. We have roughly 22 to 25,000 companies on all 7 continents using Ignite in all industries, thousands of whom are in AEC. And we just talked about this at our global summit, but we're managing over 200 petabytes of data for our customers. Some of those customers include, Red Bull, Yamaha, Fender, BioNTech, Balfour Beatty, brands that NASDAQ, the market runs on Ignite. And then next slide. So just a couple of things here. I kind of talked about this at Confluence, at Avail's conference back in October, but we're very open in the sense of trying to become the connective tissue or the digital foundation, if you will, across for really any business. But in AEC, I think we're unique because we offer 40 plus AEC integrations today, in addition to hundreds of business integrations, class leading integrations with Microsoft, Google, et cetera. And I don't see any other IT provider doing that. So like we're also seeing, maybe it's just because of Ignite's growing adoption in the AEC space, but we're seeing some of those companies running to us. So not like Data Grid, Trunk Tools, Document Crunch, and others have been building integrations with Ignite without us necessarily even asking for them over the past year, and that's great. That's where we have open APIs for that purpose. So you can bring your own favorite tools. You can build tools. We have open APIs for everything, including our AI APIs and our metadata APIs and so on. A few of the SDKs are pictured on the screen. And then if you don't want to, if you don't have a favorite tool or you don't want to code it yourself, we are offering increasing capabilities to buy it from Ignite. So whether that's this deep AI stuff, even the most basic plan, you can select 10 documents and have conversational, ChatGPT-like Q&A session with those documents, all the way up to enterprise-wide Copilot, prompt wizards that help correct your prompts if you don't know what to ask for, general purpose, but also AEC specific AI agents like specifications and contracts and code books and proposals generation and stuff that are coming out of the box, and then a no-code agent builder so that you can simply create agents as if you were just putting a prompt into Copilot. So this kind of thing, we have MCP servers. I kind of skipped over that. So however you want to connect with Ignite, we try to make that possible. And that's really important. That's part of the reason that we're looking at this Ignite plus Avail, right? Your workflows are far more complicated than just one tool, and we want to support that.
Great. Thanks, Aaron. For those of you, we've got a lot of Avail customers on this call, so I'm not going to go into too much depth about what Avail is, so we can spend most of the time talking about this stream feature. But for those of you that aren't all that familiar with Avail, we've really set out to solve, kind of three, I'd say, high-level problems. And this first one's really important, and the word single source of truth, because as we talk about your data storage being in Ignite and governance of that data and files in Ignite, that's been our mantra, is like, let those files reside wherever, for all the reasons that Aaron just laid out. On a platform like that, it's great because once your files are in there, we just want to be able to play well in that environment and not have to move your files around anymore and take advantage fully of that underlying file storage and governance platform that you've chosen in Ignite. So that's really important. Avail is agnostic not only to the content that's sitting there, but where that content is. So, you will have data other places than Ignite. Even if you are using Ignite, you're still going to have stuff in ACC, and you might still have legacy stuff sitting over at a SharePoint site or someplace. But Avail, our goal is to handle that, to manage that, be able to touch that or point to that data. And then ultimately, Avail is a really good search interface. A lot of focus on the visuals when we start showing you all of this, of seeing, finding, seeing. And we're really focused on the AEC production team. So it's a lot of technical content, reusable content that's being stored in these environments that we're helping to surface, and then have tight integrations with applications like Revit and AutoCAD and Civil 3D, and now platforms behind the scenes like Ignite. I say behind the scenes, it's this stack, it's a software stack, right? What are the applications that you're using on your desktop to do your publishing? And then ultimately, where's the output of that either coming, what are you loading from and where are you saving out your data to? And if that's that Egnyte layer, we want to be able to have as clean a connection into that as possible. And then ultimately, our goal is through the use of AVAIL platform, are we helping make your production operation more efficient, quicker to find things, quicker to implement, reducing QA, QC errors and problems downstream, all those kinds of things that you're probably fighting or would love to tackle every day. AVAIL's been on the ground not as long as Egnyte has, but we've been around since 2017, so 8 years under the belt now, and we have a lot of really great customers. A lot of you on the call probably see your logos up here, but heavy in the architecture, but becoming more and more popular in large engineering operations as well. Um, and if you are new to AVAIL, I will be pulling the interface up and showing you, but we have a desktop interface. You can think about that desktop interface to get to this information, replacing Windows File Explorer is your primary way to go find this information. And I'll talk a little bit from a technical standpoint of what we're doing with Egnyte, why we think that that's important, and the things that we can improve on by putting AVAIL in front of those kinds of files that are sitting in things like Egnyte. But we use a metaphor of channels. What I'm showing you here is one of our customers. Actually, Taylor is one of them that has already started getting Egnyte installed on their environment. So we've got some great customers who are always eager and helpful as we're introducing new things to help get them, get the edges smoothed out to make sure before we roll it out widely. And Taylor is one of those. But this is a screenshot of some of their channels that they've set up. What I'm going to be showing you that Stream does is it's an automated way of connecting to the data that's sitting in Egnyte and driving it into these channels, kind of an automatic. So presence basically of files means that it's going to show up in AVAIL. This is just another customer who's a landscape architecture firm, Europe and the Middle East, I think this particular firm, but they're using it to manage and they've set these channels up. So AVAIL's highly customizable. A lot of our customers are managing lots of different kinds of varied content inside of AVAIL. All right, so with that, let's dive into this feature that we're talking about now called Stream. So Stream's actually been around we've had it as a feature of AVAIL almost the entire time that AVAIL's been available publicly. But basically the premise was we wanted to be able to monitor a file system wherever files were, basically look for a signal. Has a file been added? Has a file been deleted? Did a file name get changed? Whatever that, what we call a CRUD operation, create, read, update, delete operation happening. And then based on some set of rules that we call stream definitions, let's evaluate what should happen in AVAIL or what that signal from the underlying file system means to the presence of that content in AVAIL and ultimately reflect that in a channel of AVAIL. So based on that. So if you've ever done, use things like if this, then that, if you've been around, the web long enough, just this idea of a rules system. If this happens, I want that to show up in AVAIL. If that is deleted from the channel in AVAIL. So basically trying to make sure that whatever state that you desired from your file system is reflected and mirrored in AVAIL without having to go do anything except the presence of the files be there, and it'll drive all this information data into AVAIL. I will say for those of you that are new to AVAIL, you can manually index, things into AVAIL, these channels. What Stream's goal is to automate that by a rules-based processing of data that's sitting on your file system. So just a brief history. As I said, we introduced the AVAIL platform commercially in 2017, and later that year, we actually introduced the first version of Stream. We have Stream that runs on several of our customers' environments on a Windows machine, sitting watching the network. We're kind of tied into low-level Windows hooks, and that was our general purpose Stream support. So a lot of cloud-first systems, including Egnyte, end up talking to these desktop, to your local machine through a protocol called SMB. We won't get into what all that looks like, but our ability to put our initial stream service on and take advantage of these low-level hooks meant that we had general support for things like Egnyte and OneDrive and Panzera or Nasuni or some other thing that you might have been using for a file system and a cloud file system. So we've always had kind of general support for that. The challenge, and actually, I could say even our initial real engagement with the Egnyte team was that SMB protocol that everybody uses to do that is a protocol, and everybody does it maybe a little bit different. And so it makes it a little bit of a challenge from a support standpoint to know, if something's working, why isn't it working, what's going on there. So we updated our stream service back in 2021, major release, and added that SMB support so that we could support more. If you just kind of go back in time, yeah, cloud's been around for 10 years, really, that everybody started really talking a lot about it, trying to move to kind of these cloud first environments in mass. And then really after the pandemic, it was like done, like everybody's now, because everybody went home to work. And we saw the wave of everybody moving to these kind of cloud first storage solutions as their primary storage. So all of these became more important. We did an update with that SMB protocol to make sure that we were supporting those environments as best we could. Now, though, this has matured to the point where we've decided, and Egnyte is the first one for us to do direct integrations with those services through the Egnyte APIs. So rather than relying on this kind of general SMB protocol, and we are actually directly now integrated into Egnyte and using the APIs to make calls and just be a little more tightly integrated, I'll say, which is going to allow us to do a lot more exciting new things as we move forward. So that's kind of the history. So I tend to get wonky technical on some of this stuff. I'm going to try to keep this pretty high level surface about what's going on. What I will say, I was talking to our lead engineer before this. I'm like, Zach, the complexity of what's actually going on, we make this look really simple on the front end, but there's a lot of complex things going on behind the scenes that you have to be accounted for to actually make something like this work. But I put together this little slide just to give everybody a kind of high level picture about what's going on. But you can think about that Egnyte, right, is a cloud first, cloud hosted environment. That's where your data is going to sit somewhere. All the rules and governance is happening. And Egnyte has a desktop connector, and it's that desktop connector that uses that SMB protocol that lets you basically open up Windows File Explorer and look at the data that's sitting in that Egnyte, solution. So, and then ultimately, if you go to grab a file, it's being transferred down through that SMB protocol to your Windows File Explorer, a local cache that Egnyte then is managing. And the same thing's happening when you're using ACC and the Autodesk ACC and their desktop connector or OneDrive connector, the different cloud environments that you've got, and they're connecting to your desktop. So that's the general way, right, that Egnyte is operating. AVAIL also has at least the data, right? The search information that we're doing in a cloud environment, right? Ours is running in AWS. And then ultimately, we're pointing usually to a file somewhere. It's on your local file system or wherever that file system is. And then that's showing up in your AVAIL interface. And all we're doing in that interface then is pointing you to that single source of truth file, wherever it is. So what AVAIL Stream is doing is behind the scenes in that cloud environment, behind the scenes, we are connecting through what are called webhooks to Egnyte. And then when something happens in Egnyte, it's firing a signal through that webhook, and we are subscribed to those webhooks. And then we take that information and, based on a set of rules, decide what to do with it. And one of those things would be, hey, a file just showed up. It meets the definition that's been defined. Have that show up in a channel, publish that basically in a channel of AVAIL that's already been predefined through what we call these stream definitions. So in general, we're looking for these create, update, and delete actions that are happening in the file system in the Egnyte. And then some specialized things that we're doing though, and we can, time permitting, we can go into as much depth as y'all want to, but we are actually grabbing the thumbnail out of those files and publishing those in AVAIL's thumbnail service. And what that means in this diagram is that when I am in the AVAIL interface, searching and browsing and seeing these thumbnails and high resolution previews, which I'll show you in the live demo, we're actually not having to touch the actual file in Egnyte. And that's important for those of you on the call that may be technical enough to know what's going on. But what that means is that we can reduce the amount of outbound traffic from Egnyte, because generally in order to see a thumbnail in a file, you actually have to transfer that file locally to the local machine. So I can talk a little bit about, photo use. I'll use that as one of my demo use cases, but where there's heavy graphics and needing to see that, there may be some technical advantages to using AVAIL on the front of it, because we actually abstract those thumbnails away. And but anyway, Aaron and I, we can kick around, some of the benefits, but you can, hopefully reduce some of your outbound traffic that might be happening there. And then just general experience for the end user of seeing that information or data, without having to wait for things to get transferred down if they weren't already cached. So before I pop up and give you a demo, just really quickly, we're like any good development project, 2 or 3 months behind where we thought we were going to be when we were talking about this. We started on this project back in April, so it's taken a good 7 or 8 months of development work with the team here. But basically in Q4, just in the last month, we've started doing what we would call field testing, or getting this actually in customers' environments. We're going to run those tests that are already on the ground through the end of the year. And then starting in January, Clay and Rob and our customer success team will start onboarding additional customers who are interested in running this. And then we may get into it when I start giving the demo, but there are some other things that we're planning to do, and we'll continue that development work in the first quarter. But we've kind of got what we would refer to as the MVP. The basics of this are now in place and operational, and you'll be able to use it. All right. So with that said, let me minimize this. Any questions so far, Clay or Rob?
No, nothing yet.
All right. So I'm going to give you, this is a little awkward because I'm going to have several windows opened up to kind of move files around and show you what's going on. But this is the AVAIL desktop interface that many of you, and I've got several channels that I'm using, and I named them streams so that it was clear that the data is coming from the stream for Egnyte into these folders. So I'm just going to start out with some really simple operations and just show you how this works. So I've already established let's just say that your use case is, which we hear from a lot of our customers. When somebody creates a new family for a Revit project, we ask them to put that RFA file over in a certain folder on the network. And that's basically our collection point for those. And we're now going to use that as our QA/QC process to decide if we're going to add some new file to the library or some process like that. So I've just set up a channel in AVAIL for the QA/QC of that content. So if I double click to go in here, what we'll see is that should be no data in here. This thing wake up. What now I'm going to do is show you in this web browser interface the stream. So if I go to stream.getavail.com and got logged in, there you can see there's no content in that channel. In the new Stream for Egnyte interface, which is through a web browser, because all of this is happening behind the scenes in the cloud. So what I'm not going to walk you through, but for those of you that are Egnyte customers already on this call, we establish a connection through a service account on your Egnyte side. And what that does is, and the main thing for us about going, I think it was the consensus across the Egnyte team and the AVAIL team working on this, that was the right way to go. One of the main concerns was we didn't want to be an individual user account where passwords might be expiring or things, all that ugly stuff that happens when you kind of get these systems set up, and now all of a sudden you had a policy that said every 6 months the password's going to change, and all of a sudden everything stops working because somebody's password's not being logged in behind the scenes. Those kinds of things we've tried to kind of take into account about the way that this service should work. So there is a service account that's established, and we connect what are called webhooks in Egnyte behind the scenes, which basically say which part of the Egnyte network infrastructure are we going to watch or have the ability to watch. So those have already been established in this account that I have set up. And then you're kind of now in AVAIL's world. So we have what we call stream servers. And you can see that I've already set up two different stream servers, a marketing stream server and a Revit stream server. One of our to-dos that is not there yet is we're actually going to create within the AVAIL role system who is managing each one of these within your environment. That way you don't just have everybody has access to everything. We're going to put a little layer of role assignment there. But in general, this is a publisher admin tool in the Avails language. And once you've set this up, you can set up these stream servers. And then the important thing is you create these stream definitions, which are basically what are the rules now that that server is set up. Let me set up stream definitions. So I'm just going to go and show you this QA/QC one that I've already created, and I can edit that stream definition. And if you're already using Avail, you'll notice that this flow looks very eerily like our manual index flow, which is basically if I manually drug stuff over onto Avail, I have to answer a set of questions. Which channel am I putting this in? What are the rules about how I want to treat that data as it comes in? So we try to mirror that same language with the stream definition. So you can imagine if you're manually indexing content from a file system into a Avail channel, this is basically saying, let's just set that up as a rule and you don't have to manually do it anymore. We'll now watch, and if data shows up there, we'll process it. So here I chose which channel that I wanted the data to drive into. So I created that Revit Family QA/QC channel. I get to give my stream definition a name. And if I go next, here's where I got to choose from that webhook, where on the network do I want to watch for these folders. So let me just cancel that. So I've already established that to look let me just go over here and show you on the network. So here on my Egnyte drive, I have some folders that I've already set up for this demo. And one of those is new Revit families folder. And if I look in there, it's empty. So I've set this stream definition up to watch that folder, and if there were any subfolders, to include subfolders. And then I get the option of having inclusion and exclusion filters. So I could, if I wanted to, say, only bring in file types of .rfa. That way, if somebody dropped, a JPEG or accidentally dropped a zip file in there or something, and you didn't want that to show up in Avail, you could positively set up a filter. If you just wanted anything that got dropped in there, this is the way you would do it. Everything that gets dropped into that folder will show up in that channel in Avail. And then exclusions with Revit, this is actually the best exclusion I know of. A lot of times you don't want backup files. So we actually support what are called regular expressions. And for those of you, so that's the regular expression. And I am not a regular expression writer by uh, by uh, by day. I'll just show you a really quick trick. If you are using Avail, we have a new AI help agent, which I'll open up right here. And if I type in regular expression, it'll pull from Clay and Team's source files back there, which includes as an example that how do you exclude Revit backup files. So there that is. You can just cut and paste that right out of there and put that into your exclusion filters if you wanted to. So once sorry, open that back up. So what folders I'm monitoring? Do I want to filter anything or not? Do I want to add any tags in general to this stuff? And do you want to import the folder names as tags, which is a general indexing flow question that we always ask. And then you can, jump around here. And then once you're done, you submit it. And what we'll see is that it's saving that definition. And after that's saved, the system is now sitting there watching that file system for any activity. So I'll just go back. You can see again, there's nothing in this channel. And what I'm going to do now is drop a file over there. So I've got here on my local temp, I've got a couple of families that I want to submit to the library. And like a good soldier, you've told me that to go put those over here on the network, which I'm going to do. So I'm just going to copy those over onto the Egnyte drive into that folder location. And if you watch here, if you happen to have your stream interface up, you'll actually see a active monitor kick in. So watch down here in this corner. There it goes. So that service kicked in. It took a second, right, for the files to actually transfer up to Egnyte from my desktop location. And then that hit, and then the webhook got called, and then Avail was hooked into those rules, and we scraped across that rule and said, is this activity that just happened fit one of our definitions about what we're supposed to be doing? And if so, if I refresh this channel now, publish those files into that channel of Avail. So if I go to one of these in Avail and say open the location of that, what you're going to see is that is in the Egnyte drive, right? It's in my Z drive, which is what we've got the default map to for our Egnyte setup. So that all works, very easily. And I'll just show you here, if I were to change one of the names of the files on the file system. So let's just go here and put underscore testing underscore. So I've changed the name of the file. Again, you're going to see back here behind the scenes that kick in. There was a name change that was happening in Egnyte. The webhook picked it up. We subscribed to that. We found out that it changed. And now if I were to go update and refresh this channel, sorry, I should see that this file has now been updated in Avail. So we're curing this is what we would call curing the paths. The path was broken because the name of the file got changed. So the file path that Avail was storing to point to that file is now broken, but we're auto curing that by subscribing to those changes in Egnyte. I'll put that back. So what I'll say is that we are, as an example, we are pulling those thumbnails out of that RFA file, and that's now in Avail's thumbnail service. And if I go over and show you some of these other channels, good use cases for this, because I'll just fire this, I'll fire this off because obviously when you've got a bunch of files, it takes a little longer. But this is like a photo library that's sitting over on the network. So I've got 107 files here. If I go show you, that's in this precedent library folder. There's a bunch, and I'm just going to go over on my network where I've got more of these. This is our demo content that we demo with. So I've got a precedent library. So I'm not going to grab all these, but I'll just grab several of them. Copy those over onto the network. So here's 117 files. Again, one of the things that you're going to have to get used to is these files are local. They're on my machine. They had to get copied using Egnyte's desktop connector into Egnyte to the cloud location. That process has to happen and is happening right here. Once those start hitting Egnyte's cloud service, we're then kicking in and subscribe to that webhook and seeing the activity. We have to then kick in, go grab the file. We have to go grab and create the thumbnail out of it. So that's why I say there's a lot more complicated things kind of going on behind the scenes than it looks like. So it can take a while for it to process those, but we do give you this little indicator. So if it was taking longer than you thought, you can at least go back behind the scenes and check to make sure that it's running. But there was 107 files in here, and if I refresh this channel, we'll start to see these. Now there's 112. But as an example, if I go full screen here, these are, of course, completely searchable. But if I open up my high-res preview, we're actually storing high-res previews of that. Again, we're not having to retrieve that data again from Egnyte in order to do that. we're still pointing to that single source of truth file on the file system when you want to go do something with it. That is in the Egnyte system, but all the previewing is happening without having to actually, transfer data from Egnyte to do that. So we think that there's a lot of benefit to that over time as you're streaming this kind of data in and wanting to see it and view it. So I'm just going to leave that running behind the scenes because it's processing those files. And, oh, sure, that's finishing up the copy. Let's go back to my slides now. All right. Before I move on, any comments or questions, or Aaron, you want to make any comments about what I was showing or
Yeah,
correcting?
I see we do have one question the team might want to look at, but a couple of things. One, you mentioned single source of truth earlier. Just to say for the record, like that doesn't mean one content repository. It does mean though that we can see it all, right? So connecting things, ideally governing things. I just that's something that I always latch on to. I like that example around the thumbnails because while we can do that something similar in our web UI, it's very easy to show videos, photos, stuff like that in the web interface. There are some built-in structural limitations to Windows Explorer, Mac Finder that make that more tricky with the desktop app. And most of the Egnyte user base, other than those who are in media, and of course are using the online gallery all the time for that reason, most are using the desktop app, thinking of it just as a file server down the hall, which is one of its strengths, but that does provide some limitations. So that's a nice method for circumventing those limitations. One other thing. You said, hey, this appears in the web UI because all this is happening in the cloud. I'm like, we should probably stop for a second and remind folks like how important that is when we have cloud to cloud conversations happening. We can do a lot of hard work that just doesn't disrupt the end user's workflow at all. And that it's you actually showed an example of why or where it can break down, right? If files are stored locally as opposed to being synced to the cloud, then you're introducing that extra time just to copy stuff around. Whereas obviously if this stuff's just communicating cloud to cloud in the background, it's can seem near instant to a user. Maybe I'll save, like, we could talk about future intelligence for
Yeah.
later, but you've got this Antonio's
Now,
question, which might be a hard one.
well, and I think, Aaron, your point about the getting that thumbnail, our claim, I make claims all the time. My claim would be, again, AVAIL is focused on production teams in the AEC industry, which means they're working on a computer with a piece of software like Revit or Rhino or some what I would call thick application on their desktop, which means they're probably interacting with their content for those applications through Windows File Explorer, not a web browser. Web
Right.
browsers are just not good interface to getting to that. And because all of these cloud first are using an SMB protocol to talk to Windows File Explorer, as Aaron said, there are some limitations to it. And that's why I keep harping on one of those limitations. I'll just say are getting thumbnails out of files and seeing them. When you go to Windows File Explorer and say view thumbnail, the files have to transfer down in order for the local operating system to show you that thumbnail. So we're abstracting that away, and it's I think, going to be one of the really nice benefit to data that you are storing in Egnyte, and you do have AVAIL on the front end of that we're not having to actually transfer that data. So, and that's what I was getting at when I said we can reduce transfer costs. You're not, you actually don't, you get a bill, right? It's baked in. You're paying for that data to move around, whether you know it or not. So, interesting things there. And I think, as we get use cases and this is out there, I think AVAIL and Egnyte are going to be able to go out and say, hey, here's some actual data. We've reduced traffic this much. This is together, they're optimizing, the way that these systems can work. So Clay, did we have some questions?
We did. Yeah, we had one come through from Antonio. And then another one just popped in. So for Antonio, after locating data on the network using AVAIL Stream and Egnyte, can you move the selected content into another designated project folder?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And you can, well, two things. If you think about the the webhook that I showed you when I picked the folder location. So wherever you pick on the Egnyte network, we're able to watch everything below that point in the folder structure. So if that ended up being on your project side where you've got maybe project folders and project data, that also gets a very interesting use case because you could set a rule up to say, hey, in every one of our project folders, we have a folder called red lines. And that's where people put their PDF documents when they've done, fabrication red lines or something. And you could set up a stream definition in Avail and watch across that entire folder structure and set up a rule that says when you see a folder called red lines and there's a file that's a PDF, have it show up in this channel of Avail, and you can aggregate red lines across all of your projects and have them show up in one channel of Avail. So there's some really interesting, I think as our customers start to think about how they might use this, there's some really powerful use cases. There's also some very powerful workflows. The idea that I QA/QC'd data into that one folder and drove it into Avail, did something with it in Revit through Avail, and then go back to my network and now move it from that folder over into the library. You could have that set up and drive that data automatically into your library and some things like that. So we'll get into, some nuance, and Clay and Rob and customer success team will help, as you start to think about how to implement some of these things, we'll go that route. Did I even answer the question, Clay? I'll make sure I'm clear about what he was asking, but ask it again. Just let me make sure it's clear.
Yes, he said after locating data on the network using Avail Stream and Egnyte, can you move the selected content into another designated project folder?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. File system, you can move from one file system to another file system, or within Egnyte file system, move from one place on the network to another. You can, through the Avail interface, you could actually drag, because you can think about Avail's interface just like Windows File Explorer. So you could grab a file there, which is really the file on Egnyte, and drag it over into another folder of Egnyte, and it's going to move it or, do its thing. So, Aaron, did you want to comment on that?
No, I like that idea of thinking of stream in that way as more than just a monitor of, and sort of a way of visualizing on the Avail side in a certain way, but as a potentially as a mechanism then for, interacting with your file system.
Mhm.
Another question there, Clay?
Yes, we got another one from Jason. If Avail is hosted on AWS and Egnyte is hosted on a different provider, how is availability handled if one of those services experiences an outage?
I mean, if one of the big guys goes down, it just depends. Usually it's not the entire service goes down. It's usually parts of some of those services that go down. So, whether or not those end up affecting things that we're taking advantage of is, an open question. We've tried, I can't say, when Amazon for us, AWS has had some major outages, we've been down too, but usually they're trying to get up, believe me, as quickly as possible. So they're trying to minimize downtime. I'm sure, Aaron, you're primarily in Azure. Is that correct, Aaron?
No, we're on the other one of the big three.
You're on Google.
So, however, interestingly enough, since you've said that, I recently learned that I think particularly for our Middle East customer base, we have a complete failover stack in Azure of Egnyte, like well, at great expense to us because we don't normally operate there. But like we have the ability, if GCP were to go down, our 11 nines of uptime, that's about a second a year. But if they were to go down and break their own SLA, then then we have the ability to shift Egnyte entirely, which is an interesting thing that I doubt we've ever had to exercise.
Yeah, I think one other way to answer that question is, I think one of the nice things about the architecture of the way Avail works is we're not taking possession of your file. We're just helping you find the file. So if for some reason Avail went down, the files are still there. They're still on Egnyte. You may now not like that you have to go back to the old way of getting to it, but it is still there. So there's some redundancy, right, by having that single source of truth there. If Egnyte for some reason went down, you can't get to those files anyway, right? So,
Yeah. And for our, for Egnyte customers, if this if this question was coming from the Egnyte side, typically, at least for multi-office firms, a little bit larger firms, you'll typically have some kind of caching appliance or hybrid appliances. They're optional with Egnyte, but if you have, a large number of employees at a location, just from a performance perspective, it helps to have those kinds of devices. And you can also at the user level sync, folders for offline access and stuff if you're loading really heavy stuff. So you likely have some copy of the content that is not only ever in the cloud for some of your critical files at least. So if there was this major outage, there's still, at least some possibility of getting to your content. And then we have conflict management for those rare situations where usually it's because some user chose to go offline with something and open a file, in a location where they were offline, and they might be able to create some kind of conflict version of a Word document or something. But yeah, so we have a lot of, that's a whole longer conversation, but we have a whole lot in place to help with that.
yeah. Clay, any questions before I move to roadmap on
No,
this?
that was
Okay.
the last one.
All right. So let me just take a couple of minutes and kind of tell you what the future of our stream feature looks like. We're actually not only doing integration with Egnyte, but we've actually already started on stream for ACC. So we're actually doing an integration, same thing, direct with APIs to Autodesk Construction Cloud so that we can connect there. So you can think about Construction Cloud and those services from Autodesk behind the scenes in two ways. It's you can think about storage and file storage in the way that you're putting project information or data in ACC. But I think more importantly, from AVAIL's standpoint, Stream for ACC is also going to be hooking into the I don't even know what they call it now. They change it. The Forge processing tools behind the scenes. So as Aaron was alluding earlier, the idea that we could do processing behind the scenes, cloud to cloud, right? So if you've got files stored in ACC and Avail's wanting to do some processing on those files, rather than those having to get transferred to a machine or somewhere else, we can now start to think about doing, hey, let's do direct transfer of that data behind the scenes, cloud to cloud, do some processing on it, either write some data back to Egnyte or push a file back over into Egnyte. So I think there's a lot of really exciting things. Aaron and I've talked a little bit, and we've obviously been talking internally, but the files may not even exist on Egnyte yet. So there may be things that Avail's doing where it's creating content or things are happening, and we're pushing that data into Egnyte as your primary storage location. So for us, that's exciting. I've always kind of dreamed of our stream service, not just being watch what's there, but be the mechanism to actually put data on your own storage, in your own storage location or based on some set of rules. So for those of you that are customers, and we're on roadmap calls this year, you may have heard me talking about routing. This is what I'm talking about. Can we, when something's happening that Avail's got control of, either a file somewhere, can we route that file and put it in storage where it should go, and we're based on some set of rules. So I think there's a lot of exciting, and I know, Aaron, I can see Egnyte's already doing some of this, but I think, this is where it's going to get really powerful if you take what we're doing with Avail, we start taking advantage of what Egnyte is already doing and can start routing data around in the right way. I think that's the next gen of this. Go ahead.
Hey, Randall, I just want to mention, so we have, class exclusive governance capabilities for ACC. And I was just thinking, I wonder if, our if Egnyte if it's governing an ACC source and you start streaming from ACC, if it'll label you as probable ransomware. So we'll see how
we'd have to
observe behavior.
Just to get everybody that's on this call to thinking, I'll just use rendering in Revit as an example. When you have a material that has an external texture map, right? It's a JPEG, PNG, TIFF, whatever that file for that goes with it. That's what I would call a loose piece of content. The material definition in Revit says, hey, there's a file called a JPEG that I'm supposed to load and do something with. In Revit today, you have to go define a specific location in Revit before Revit's launched of where to look for that texture. And it's not recursive. So it has to be exactly in this folder. So imagine that that was a folder sitting in Ignite. You're managing your texture library generically over here, but on that project, you wanted to use this texture, we could, Avail could route that texture over into a project folder or somewhere on Ignite of where that file needed to be in order for the system to work, right? Without you getting an error or kind of all that. So when I talk about routing and writing, so write permissions to the file system, in this case, Ignite is your single source of truth for where you want all of that stuff. And you might want to go from a generalized resource library to a project specific location where you want that data to live. And right now, we're all, as you know, it requires a human to understand all of that and a human to go do it. I think we can start smoothing that out and making this stuff a little bit more magical by just, it just goes and it shows up where it should go because the rules were set up and the system was set up in such a way. So I think there's going to be a lot of exciting things now that we've got this first piece in place that we'll be able to start building on and doing some really exciting things around that. So uh, Stream for ACC, we actually had queued up. We were going to start working on Stream for OneDrive. You know, everybody's got a Microsoft set up, so we were going to integrate with OneDrive and SharePoint. We've actually put the ACC work in front of that, but we have already started mapping this out. And the work that we did to integrate this with Ignite laid out the framework for what to do. And now, you know, hopefully some of these others will be easier. I put a question mark here. You know, I don't know what, you know, those are the clearest ones that we should do, whether we should do an integration with Google. We're actually a Google shop, so I'm a little biased about that. And but you get a lot more OneDrive, you get a lot more Microsoft OneDrive shops than you do Google shops in this industry. Uh, but uh, but anyway, Stream for us as a feature set is going to now allow us to do direct integrations, and it'll be basically our rules processing layer in the Ignite or in the Avail system. Where do we set up rules? Which thing are we connected to? We'll set up definitions for those, and then all the processing starts to happen, and that's our kind of general backplane for processing in the Avail ecosystem. So I think that's all I had. You know, we've been working on some, we're working on a new white paper that we're going to try to get out. I'll see if we can get it out before the end of the year, but just talking in general about this ecosystem. But if you start to, you know, I think in general, where everything that we're showing today and the things that we were just talking about, this is about not just a bunch of files sitting statically in environments. It's about some intelligence layer to understand what those files are, where they should be, what they're for. Avail's working on a suggestion engine, which is can I bring content to you instead of you having to go to it in some intelligent ways. So I just think in general, you know, these are all the core building blocks to be able to do a lot of exciting things that really make this information and content and files and stuff that you're creating every day and your teams are creating much more valuable because that's where all the knowledge and the information is stored are in these files that are being stored and tucked away everywhere. And if we can unleash those and open them by making them available, opening them up, bringing them to you in a more intelligent way, that there's just a lot of, you know, there's a lot of opportunity for product development improvement around the industry with what's going on here. So um, that's all I had. That's pretty good. We have 5 minutes left if anybody wants any comments or questions.
Maybe if Randall just touch on the future a bit, like more than what you're talking about for roadmap there, but we talked about intelligence a little bit, and I I could see where this opens the door, this kind of integration opens the door for Avail, for example, to just ask Ignite, find me all Revit door families used on this type of commercial project over the last 3 years, be able to ask intelligent questions using maybe AI to AI or just software to AI.
Yeah, for sure. You know, I think we've all everybody who's doing any of this work on the AI front has been, you know, starting to experiment with these MCP servers. I know, Aaron, you said you've got those fully deployed. So for those of you on the call that aren't familiar, MCP servers are ways to basically sit in between the APIs and have AI agents, agent to agent, kind of make queries, ask natural language questions to these things and get results back. So for sure, I think there's going to be those kinds of possibilities. And for us, we'll build some of our own stuff, but like you said, once we're integrated and talking to and know that your data is in Ignite, why shouldn't we be able to tap into that and say that's even just more information? And so we'll start. I think we just got to get this on the ground, have customers help us drive, like, hey, and ask the what ifs, or could you, from the customer side. Uh, But anyway, yeah, and we'll experiment, right? And we usually do experiments and then show it just to get people's wheels turning. It's like, okay, what could you do with this if we started, uh, in that direction? So, um, yeah, any other thoughts? We are one of the things that we're building, and we've shown some of the people on the call have seen it, but we're building a difference engine. So we're able to compare data from like copies of data. So this diff engine is also going to be, we think it's going to be the core layer of Avail for driving QA/QC information that's needed to drive QA/QC processes. Hey, is this file the same as this file? This thing got changed or edited. What changed about it from what it was before? All those kinds of things are the things that drive decision making in this world. So we're building some of that, and I think there'll be a lot of. I was also going to say, Aaron, I know when we were at AU, you all just introduced. I don't know what you call it, but you all have got a similar feature of like building a rule that if this happens on the Ignite file system, then do this to it. Is that
Oh yeah, we've had, I
what's
mean,
that
our
called?
workflows have existed for a long time, but they were simpler before. And now we have workflow automation that's getting really powerful because there's AI capabilities available to be a part of the workflow.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, we've just been busy trying to get this where we are implemented, but those are features of Ignite that now, if we dig in and those are available via the API, you can imagine in the stream definition saying, hey, we've got these workflow rules that are in Ignite. Can we have those show up and say, when this happens, trigger this workflow thing to happen over on the Ignite side. So I just think there's going to be a lot of opportunities as we get this on the ground to learn what people are wanting to do with it, and we'll hopefully a year from now be back on here showing all kinds of really cool workflows that have been built with this.
Well, hopefully your customers or our mutual customers will tell us what are the things
Yeah.
that they're doing right now that are manual steps in between these kinds of platforms, because that's where the opportunity is.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thanks, Aaron, for coming on and spending this hour with us. Yeah, hopefully we'll see in 2026. We the last couple of years as we've gone out to any of the conferences and shows, we tend to hang out together with the Ignite team and either do some joint parties or joint events together out on the road. So I'm sure we'll be doing more of that in 26. And if there's any last questions, Clay, we're going to wrap up.
No, nothing in the queue.
All right. Thanks everybody for joining us this afternoon. And if you are interested in implementing after the first of the year, just get in touch with Clay,
Mhm.
customer success team, and he'll get you on the schedule and we will get you set up.